Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Whitetail Rendezvous is pleased to announce a partnership with GoHunt.com. Who's GoHunt.com? Well, if you're a DIY hunter, you need the information at GoHunt.com/insider. Why? Because it provides 4,200 profiles, every unit, every species, and every season. Furthermore, they give in-depth analysis, interactive maps, unit access, and seasonal trends. Draw odds are very important, and they give you the most accurate information in the business. All this is available when you go to GoHunt.com/insider. Make sure you use promo code WR when you join Insider. You'll get a $50 gift card for GoHunt.com Gear Shop. Remember, when you become a member of GoHunt.com/insider, you're going to get a $50 gift card to Go Hunt Gear Shop. What's in the gear shop? The best gear that you can buy for hunting the West. All in all, if you're hunting out West in 2018, GoHunt.com/insider is where you need to be to get all the research information. When you use promo code WR, Whitetail Rendezvous receives a small commission from GoHunt.com. Rackology, Eric Fitzgerald and Jason Overmiller, and your host, Bruce Hutchin with Whitetail Rendezvous. We've joined up and we're sharing some ideas about land management and food plots, and why we're doing this, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of advertising out there. There's a lot of promotion out there. There's a lot of sponsors out there. People are being sponsored by XYZ, company. And we go, wow, I'm going to buy some of that. Well, you have no earthly idea why you're buying it, except that there's a green field behind the person, shooting this wonderful buck and saying, I use X. That's marketing. I get it. But when you start drilling down into it, what are food plots? What aren't they? Food plots start with, with seed. Some sort of seed has to come out of the ground so the deer are going to eat it. And there's a lot of prep work that goes into that. So, guys, let's jump into it. We get about a half an hour to share with our listeners what food plots are and what they're not.
All right. Well, I guess looking at food plots, they are, as the name implies, they're a plot that you plant that bring wildlife there for mainly two reasons: food and cover. And some animals will use the same food plot for food that others use for cover. And what you're trying to do is centralize the wildlife on your property and also provide something that maybe wasn't there to either increase your odds at harvesting a buck or a doe. It might be a turkey or pheasants, hunting pheasants. So, and it's also there if you're just enjoying wildlife and want to give back a little bit, because as we all know, habitat in the United States has shrunk immensely for wildlife, whether it be urban development or what might be happening. But so anytime a little goes a long way when it comes to wildlife, habitat and food plots. And so that's, I guess, in my opinion, what they are in a nutshell. Their nutrition, their cover, and their sanctuary for wildlife.
And you look at food plots also from a standpoint of, if you go out into nature, into the trees, wherever you're hunting at, it may be grassland area, like out in western Nebraska, and you look at the quality of forage that's available. Nothing, I'm not knocking Mother Nature, nature per se, but the forage quality out there, the amount of nutrients that's naturally available in nature, just doesn't compare to what you can bring to them in a food plot. If a person can only afford to do just a little for your deer, and you had to decide whether do I put out some feed or do I put out a food plot, I mean, the answer there is the food plot is where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, no pun intended, because you've got a growing time from spring that they can start eating through the fall months and into the winter months, even on some of the perennials like we have now. Is feeding, mineral and feed like that, is that beneficial? Of course. I mean, As I stated, a few months ago in a podcast we did with you, I mean, February, March, and April, a lot of people don't realize this, but February, March, and April are like huge months for fawn and antler growth. The bucks are storing the minerals on their skeleton that they're going to use to grow the antlers in the summer months. And those months are when there's hardly any food available over the winter months. And when you've got, let's say you can put out a sizable food plot, even if you can't afford to, put out any mineral or any feed, if you've got a sizable, perennial food plot that these deer can continue to dig and get into, you're just giving them that much more edge on storing those nutrients in the critical times and getting them through the winter, healing them up from the rut. So, nutrition-wise, food plots are great compared to what's out there in nature. Because when you get into browsing on leaves off of trees and a lot of the grasses that are available in the trees, the native grasses are fairly decent in nutritional value. But obviously, if you can have a food plot out there, whether you hunt or not, your wildlife on your property is going to benefit from a food plot just because of the nutritional value that you bring to it.
Well, then we like to really pride ourselves on bringing in a high quality plant species for the food plot. I've been doing, born and raised on a farm. I've been around cattle. I sell a full line of cattle feed as well and companion animal stuff. We always talk about sending samples in, whether it be just alfalfa bales or anything like that might come in, and send them off a relative feed value. What is that cow getting when it's ingesting, this hay? What's the relative feed value? What's the protein? And the higher the relative feed value, the better you are. So there are some things that grow well for tonnage for alfalfa and hay that maybe they're not the highest in relative feed value, where different species of clover that we use in our mixes as well for Rackology, been proven to bring in higher relative feed value, which brings in better protein. It helps mineralize what's in the soil and bringing it out and getting it into that deer, whether it be a doe in gestation or she's milking and she's got a young fawn with her. The better relative feed value, the better off you're going to have, the offspring start off quicker and hit the ground running versus feeding on, browsing on natural grasses, which there is good protein in some of that. But a small food plot, when they come in there and eat, same with supplementing feed, is the relative feed value is going to go up. And knowing what species that deer like to eat, first of all, in palatable form, and knowing which ones on top of that are going to bring in high value of protein and basis stuff. But then also know what's going to handle the amount of traffic. If you have a high deer density, what's going to handle the traffic, what's going to handle regrowth really well, what's going to handle drought if you do get a dry spill. We've done a lot of that homework where that is what a food plot is. There's a lot on the market that maybe, I hate to say it, but maybe throw stuff in a bag and call it a food plot. And there's a lot on the market that have really done their homework and know, like we've learned and stuck with, on what maybe a little more expensive, but this is what works and this is what brings more to the table. And so that's, in my opinion, what they are. What they're not is they're not all created the same, and just what I alluded to before. So not everything is going to be easy. They are not low labor. You need to get out there and you need to do your homework, blood, sweat, and tears into this, but that's going to turn around and pay back, whether just watching that food plot grow, seeing trail camera pictures of that food plot behind there, maybe be time lapse, maybe be a time thing where you just see, right there prior to the sunlight or sunrise and right before sundown, seeing all those deer out on the food plot. That tells you your density, what's out there and stuff. But that reward is what rewards you for the blood, sweat, and tears that go into that. They're not a magic thing. You just go out there, and some companies just throw and go, but they don't give you a lot of data on to make that throw and go successful. This is what you got to do. So they're just not a magic carpet. You're just going to expect to go out there and roll a bird and go home and then come back, first weekend of archery season and expect it to look like a garden.
Really?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
me, I'm not only OCD, but everything else under the sun. I know there's days when I drive Eric nuts because I'm just always thinking and doing and whatever. And, that's kind of the yin and yang. It's the thing that makes us work so awesome is, sometimes I get to prod him a little bit, and then there's other times when he's kind of blowing me back on the reins. But, kind of going off what he said with the, what it is and what it's not, we're talking about food plots in general. So I'm not putting in a plug necessarily for Rackology, but I look at, I researched other feed and mineral companies when I started because I wasn't even wanting to make something for my, necessarily to sell. I wanted the best for my deer. And so I researched stuff and I realized that, ratios are huge when it comes to, feed and what type of minerals that they can uptake based off of the ratios. The same thing goes for food plots is, so many times I've planted other food plots and the bag says there's this stuff in it and you plant it and a lot of it's the grasses that come up because some of them will grow on concrete. And there's really the stuff that is supposed to be in that bag that's the higher feed value, the more expensive seed. There's not that much in it. And, your good seed brands, you're going to pay a little more for because they've actually got in the bag what they say is in the bag, number one. Number two, when we were developing the food plot side of things, I told Eric, we talked about this, like my ratios had to be right in my feed. And for him, it was the same way. He made sure the ratios have got to be right in the bag. There's certain plants that will outcompete other plants. If you don't know what you're doing and you get the wrong ratios on your ground, you just not even planted the one seed because it's going to get outcompeted. So that's another thing, because there's people that want to do their own food plot blend and they go to a farm and ranch store and they buy this seed and that seed because they read about it on a hunting website. And people like to, do your own. And that's great. I can't blame people for doing it. I love doing that. But you have to be careful about what you plant because if the ratios aren't right, if you plant them in areas that those plants aren't going to do well, I guess that's kind of where, I really tapped into, Eric's expertise on the food plot side of things is, okay, here's what I want. What do you suggest? What plants should we really be looking at that's you're going to get the best, the best for your money type of a deal. And that's another thing that people need to look at is what food plots are and what they aren't. You can put a lot of work into a food plot and you don't have hardly anything grow. It could be blamed on Mother Nature, but it could be blamed on the wrong ratios, the wrong type of seed versus you go about it from an educated standpoint. You can even take some lower value soil and still have a really good food plot. But you got to start out doing it the right way. It might be getting the soil samples to find out, now I'm going to say this in a couple different ways. If you're wanting to do something bigger or small, you need to do your homework, which doesn't take a lot of work to get a soil sample and get it sent off and get it read. Not a big deal. Then you know whether to start off, do you need to lime your soil? Are you low in pH? What do you need to do before you even go out there and plant a food plot? Because in some other, not just Rackology, but other food plot companies out there, and every one of us is defense. I've been on these websites and people are talking about, food plot, whatever. This stuff is junk because I planted it and nothing grew. Well, the food plot you planted is actually a decent brand. It probably had to do with either what you did or nature didn't do. And it has nothing to do with the food plot. I'm sure everybody else that you interview after us that is in this business as experts is going to say the exact same thing. I'm not going to knock any of the other companies that are doing it right. We're all going to agree. If you don't do it right, it don't matter what you plant. It's not going to grow.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I agree. I think that there's things on the market right now that I'm doing what we're doing now. And I walk into somewhere and I see food plots and there's some out there that it's like the infomercials. It's like they have these big bam, bam, bam things on the bags, like last 20 years, or this grows and it smells like chestnuts, or some of these things that I just I shake my head and I kind of look and I just kind of smile to myself. And it gets you to like, oh man, maybe I need that. And I've got 15 different species of clover, deer go crazy about this, and it's marketing. But what we try to do is sometimes a 2 clover plot is a lot, 2 different varieties of clover are a lot better than 15 different varieties because they're going to outcompete. And by the time you get to the end of the year, the ones that are going to outcompete the other ones, you're going to be down to a 2-clover plot. And so what we try to do is, and all chicory is not chicory. All turnips are not turnips. All radishes aren't. There's different varieties and things that work well. And, I've been doing cover crops for a long time, and cover crops do the same thing. You try to cover the ground the best you can. And so that does a good job of covering. But what you need to do is figure out, well, too much coverage. Plant species need sunlight for photosynthesis. They need to have moisture and root development, and they also need to have oxygen for respiration. If you don't have all that, if brassicas get too tall and the turnips get too tall, you got a big wide leaf brassica turnip, shading out your clover and shading out some maybe some chicory you have in there, you might as well not spend the money, because chicory is not cheap. You might as well not spend the money and buying a plot that's too heavy of one or the other. So we've done a lot of research and knowing, okay, the different varieties you have in there and their growth potential, and also what's in there that's not going to overcompete, and there's going to be a symbiosis relationship between all the plant species out there. With a good year, you're going to have, like I said, you can plant annual rye on concrete and it's going to come up and it's going to be green for a while. Some people just want to see a green field, and you can plant rye really cheap and it looks good. Deer will go out there and feed in it, but they're not getting a lot of the value. You are bringing them and centralizing them a little bit, because that's the only green thing out there in the fall sometimes is rye or wheat, but you're not getting what you really want out of there. And so we just really hone in on what we know of the plant species and get those in our Rackology blends. And then going into, not all soils are created equally. We do have a food plot fertilizer. There are guys that already have a source of fertilizer, but we pride also in marrying our fertilizer with our plot blends as well as other ones on the market to fix a lot of the nutritional problems, the fertility problems that might be in that soil, that help things out too. And doing agronomy and fertilizer work and being in fertilizer retail for a few years, 6 years to be exact. But, the importance of not just having MAP 1152O out there or just urea for a nitrogen source, and how important microbials are in the soil health, and how alive your soil is to make that food plot. So
that's one thing that we had calls from people in states that you can't put out mineral. That's one thing I went to Eric, and I'm like, can we make a fertilizer that we can supplement our deer through our food plot? And that's the thing that he got to work on next was, something that is going to work from the ground up through the roots, because that's the other side of things. If you're going to do a food plot, you need to make sure that you take care of it. If you got an area that's got awesome soil, you probably don't need our stuff, because it's going to have the nutrients, it's going to have the microbes, and life is good. But on a lot of people's soil, it's not. And that's one of the things, with these people in these states were saying, how can we need to be able to supplement our deer, but we just can't legally do it. What do you got? So, he went to work on the fertilizer side of things. It's not just your normal NPK. It's, there's the minerals that are added to it that go into the soil that the plant can take up that are chelated. There's other components that allow specifically that soil microbes. That's the huge key thing is, if those soil microbes are super healthy and you've got a lot of them, now all of a sudden they can begin to unlock all this trapped nutrients that's in your soil. You don't even know it's there. It's trapped because you don't have enough microbes to break them down as fast as the plants can use them. There's other products on the market that are just fertilizers, and that's great. There's other products on the market that, you spray on a supplement on your food, the food plot, but once it's eaten, it's gone. It's not coming up from the root. Rain and dew wash things off. I mean, you have to educate yourself on the difference between marketing and what the real deal is. And one other thing that I kind of jotted down earlier when Eric was talking about, competition between plants. We've seen advertisements for brassicas that, look at these huge brassicas. Look at what we're getting. Can you talk a little bit about as far as why it looks big and it looks awesome, but why is that not what we're really wanting?
I mean, I guess we come from a guy grows field corn and he has this big ear of corn. He's like, bigger is better. Yeah, in that regard it is. But when it comes to turnips, if you get some that are size of volleyballs, that's not doing much for you. What you want is a lot of little ones about the size of a softball to a baseball. You don't want purple top turnips or any other type of turnips to get super big, because they get woody in the middle. they take up too much room in your soil. They actually compact your soil because they're pushing out against your soil. And people just don't understand that's basically a kind of a lack of nitrogen. If you have more nitrogen, you're going to have more smaller baseball size to softball size turnips. And that tells you if I go out to a field that's been planted and a guy says, hey, come out and take a look at this. And we dig up a lot of smaller turnips. He's like, man, they're not real big. I say this is perfect. That means your soil is as far as nitrogen is in good balance. When you go and they're like, hey, look at this one. They're taking a picture of one looking like a basketball. It looks big, but it's really not doing any good. It's really kind of it's basically acting against what you're trying to do in that food plot, because it's going to take forever for that to rot and to break down. We talk about food plots.
Not as much aeration.
Yeah, and you don't get as much aeration. You want a lot of little ones versus a few big ones. But when we talk about our fertilizer and we talk about the importance of fertilizer in general, there's times where people will tear up native grass or sod. There was a really grassy type of a species there prior. And all land, no matter how good the soil is, goes through what I call land shock. When you take something out of a system that it's used to, grass have a lot of rhizobia, and they tiller across the ground. And when you take that out, it changes the soil structure for a while. That for about a 6 month to a year period, that goes through a land shock. So somebody that expects just to go, when we say what food plots aren't, if you go out there and you till up a grass that had been native grass for a long time in a tree grove, and you don't do the proper way of spraying it and killing it and letting it decay and then tilling it, you're going to go into a land shock. First of all, it's going to be really hard to grow anything in the thatch that's in there, but it's going to go through a period of land shock where not a lot's going to grow very well, very fast. And so people look at that and say, well, I planted it and didn't do worth a dang, and it must be the seed. And like I said, when you're pointing the finger, usually there's 4 pointing back at you, because I've been doing agronomy a long time, and there's times where I've been pressured to get a food plot in or a cover crop in, and it might not be the best date, and we just try to pressure ourselves into it, and then it doesn't happen. Well, when I see it, I'm like, I know exactly why this wasn't successful. But a lot of people maybe that aren't really trained or know what's happening, they might not know, and the first thing they do is probably try to blame the seed or something that just maybe wasn't right on our part or on whoever's seed they're using. But so that fertility, there's just some things that are important when it comes to what they are, what food plots are, and a lot of that is what's underneath the soil and the right ratios of plants and the ratios that the wildlife are going to like, and what they're going to do, what they're supposed to.
Can you just touch on reading the tag?
Yeah. I do
need to touch on that.
Jason and I do that a lot, whether it's feed or if we're in a store and we see something, and times I look at a tag, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty darn good stuff. And time I look at it, and I'm like, I can't believe they're selling it for this much. But I guess it's very important to look at the tag. Or a lot of companies will put the description on the back, and they'll put planting dates, because we all live all over the world in the U.S. And what's perfect planting dates for here in central Nebraska and Sherman County versus even 5 counties south of us, completely different. So with the tag, planting dates are very, very important. And you need to look at those dates. You need to look at what area of versus longitude, latitude, and planting dates for a specific variety. And that's all. I mean, usually if it's not on the bag or on the tag, it's usually on the website, which is very good to go in there and take a look. Okay, I'm in Arkansas, and I'm calling Nebraska to say, okay, when should I plant this? Jason and I will know. We could guide them to the right dates, but they should look at the website, look on the back of the bag. Another thing is, when it comes to is what we touched on before, is look in the breakdown. They should have what type of clover it is. They should have what type of brassica it is and a percentage of what's in there. If they don't have any of that on the tag, or they should have a tag on everything. But if they don't have that breakdown, a lot of times I was worried, way back when we first started this, is I didn't want to divulge our secrets. This is a great mix, and we don't want everybody in the world to have it. But you have to be transparent and knowing exactly what's in there and the quality of it.
What about the born on date?
Yeah, then everything there should have a testing date. And we pride ourselves in, if we had to get in the refrigerator and we look at a jug of milk and it's expired, we probably don't drink it. Yeah, we're born on date with the beer. Unless we're desperate to drink that milk or that beer, we probably won't drink it if that born on date is expired. Same thing goes with seed. Seed could be viable and it loses germination every year, a little naturally every year. And if it's not stored in proper conditions, like if it's stored in a inside 72 air conditioned during the summer, the worst thing on seed is it could be exposed to heat. The cold weather doesn't have any effect on it. Actually, it's good. That's why we store a lot of our seed bank in Antarctica and in the northern regions where it stays cold, because actually cold weather preserves seed viability. Hot weather ruins it. So if it's stored in an area that's in a warehouse that's not temperature controlled and it's there for 2 years and it gets hot, more than likely your germination is going down. So the born on date will tell you, okay, this is 2-year-old seed or this is seed that was just tested a month ago. And that's on every one of our bags. And that's something to look at, is see how old that seed is. If there's not a born on date on there, you could be buying seed that's 5 years old. It's been sitting on a shelf of store A for 5 years, and you just grab it and it looks new, but you get out there and plant it and don't have the best results. And
he is super anal about stuff like that. Like I am with the feed side, and that stuff, there's been times where we literally didn't have enough bags filled to go to a store because he wanted to make sure that it was as fresh as possible. And I love that about how he is with seed, because I didn't realize that in depth about the germination and the specificity of, what heat does to those seeds and the time frame. And so that's the other thing. I mean, you need to really look at the freshness of those seeds. And I want you to talk about what PLS is.
Well, and a lot of people they'll look at a bag and they'll say, okay, it's $19.99 for a quarter acre. This other one is $10.99 for a quarter acre. And when we go in and we decide how many plant species has to be in a quarter acre, you're looking at pure live seed, looking at the PLS, which should be on every one too. It should show your pure live seed, and it should show your inert matter, which is everything but what you want. Because let's face it, when you bag something, you are going to have some foreign matter, whether it be seed, seed coating, seed hulls that might have got in there, weed seed, anything like that, and stuff you don't want. That's all legally supposed to be on there. So your pure life seed, you want the highest percentage, highest 100% as possible. So what we've told people is, or they'll say, well, it's a 10-pound bag for $19.99, and here's a 10-pound bag for $29.99. I'm going to buy the $10.99 because it's still 10 pounds. The biggest misconception people could do is buy on a dollar per pound or dollar per pound basis. They need to go off a dollar per pure life seed basis, because even though it's 10 pounds, there could be 5% inert matter in there, and then the germination can be low, and then all of a sudden you're spending more money for that because you're not going to get near what you paid for. So when it comes to that bag tag, the breakdown of the species that are in there, the planting dates, the born on date or the tested date, and the pure life seed are important to look at. Because if you're not doing that and you're basing on the almighty dollar sign, you're doing yourself an injustice. And that's why every year you can go back and say, well, I know this has been a quality product. This has been a quality product. I've had good, and that's where we've had good luck with it, because people always come back to us of maybe 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years to try and plant food plots. And 1 year they do good, 1 year they don't do good, and 3 years they don't do good. And then they come to us, and the last 3 years they've been really happy with what they're getting in that bag and the performance that we're getting. So
I feel like I just went to school.
Well, coating, too. Coating could be misconceived. I mean, there are some species of seeds that need to be coated because no matter where you're at, if you're down in southeast United States and there's a lot of humidity, wet soils, you're going to have a lot of disease and fungal problems when that seed is most vulnerable, when it's germinating and sprouting out of the soil surface and before it gets, in that infancy stage. So what the coating does is help that seed fight off those diseases until it gets big enough to fend it off itself. So if you don't have some of those treated, then you might have that species not even survive in different types of years that you might have. So that's important to look at, is because the coating is inert matter. So if you see an inert matter that's high, and then you look and say, okay, some of this is coated, that's why. It's not just weed seed or junk that's in there we don't want. It's because it takes up room in that bag, and that coating does help protect. So you want to look at that pure live seed, how many seeds per acre you're getting, and not just go off a 1/4 acre bag or a 10-pound bag or all the flashy symbols that you see on a bag that might throw you off. I mean, you really look at, I wish everything was created equal and then everybody just had their bag tag on the front of the bag. And that's what people looked and judged by. A lot of people won't turn that bag around. They'll just look at the front and say, oh, this person's on it and they do this and I've seen them on TV, I'm going to buy it. And
well, one thing too, I had when we kind of redoing our new bags, our store bags. One thing I said we need to do is the smoke and mirrors of other bags on the shelf. One of them might say square feet. Mm-hmm. Well, how many people know X amount of square feet? That don't mean crap to a lot of people. For me, I'm a bow hunter. You tell me how many yards it is, and I can visualize that, right? Some people, they can visualize acres. And so, one thing to kind of clear that up, I said, I want everything on the bag. I want to know how many, is this a 1/4 acre? How many square feet it is? That way anybody can look at the bag and go, I can visualize a 1/4 acre. I can visualize how many square feet's an acre. That's the other thing, you're looking at, make sure you're getting what you think you're getting versus what the advertisements are saying.
Yeah, I hear that. And, listeners, food plot seeds, we're talking about seeds, what they are and what they're not. In the end, it's your dollar, it's your time, it's your labor, but you're going to spend X amount of money anyway. So you might as well give yourself the best possible advantage to have some sort of a crop, not crap, actually a crop. And so it starts, it's a process. And for people who'd say, well, gee, I don't know a lot about it, do some reading, watch videos, call guys like Rackology and say, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. So when you go in the bar, you go to work, and, well, how's your food plot coming? Oh, it's coming real good. Look at the pictures, and all he did is spray nitrogen on his field and it's all greened up and looks great. But comes the fall, there's no benefit to the deer. The pictures were great. And unfortunately, in the world of marketing, that's what we see sometimes in big box stores. The pictures are great,
And one thing I'd like to just real quick say too is what's important is on the bag tag is what you said kind of reminded me is you always want to look at the origin of the seed. You want to see what state that one comes from, because a lot of the good seed and stuff that's tested really well comes from the northwestern part of the United States. And you want to make sure that to see that origin, where that seed was originated at, where it was grown and where it was harvested. And that's another, I guess, something to research if you want to get online and look at, okay, what's the difference between seed grown in Oregon versus seed grown here, and then it really dives into saying, okay, this is why this seed from Northwest is a little better because it's grown in more of a temperature controlled environment. And so it's very important to look at that.
And with that, folks, we're going to wrap up section 2, food plots, what they are and what they aren't with Rackology and Eric and Jason. And we're going to take a little break here and then tune in for, Planting 365 is the last section from Rackology on food plots. Talk to you in a little bit. Hey, folks, a special edition of Whitetail Roundup is coming. I've asked 3 companies, Land and Legacy, Rackology, and Grandpa Ray Outdoors, to be part of a series on land management and food plots. So the next few episodes, about 18 of them, in fact, are going to be about either land management or food plots. Why? Because people have been asking me a lot of questions. So I went out and chatted with some guys, and Adam Keith and Matt Dye from Land and Legacy is joining the crew. And at Rackology, we have Jason Obermiller and Eric Fitzgerald. And rounding out the team is Grandpa Ray Outdoors with John O'Brien. Each of them is going to bring a different flavor on what is land management, what are food plots, why you need them, the pros and cons. So listen up to the next series, and I sure hope you like them. If you like them, let me know. If you don't like them, let me know what I can do better. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.